I ran the company my parents left behind with my sister. One day I overheard a Zoom call left open. Nah, Mom, she's just a tool, use her and throw her away. Sister, I'll be CEO, she can stay a lowly employee. Dad, I tease her duty to serve us. The next day I sold everything. Days later, they heard the words they never expected, you're all fired. Headquarters of Campbell Construction Supply was located about a 20-minute drive from a quiet residential area in the Boston suburbs. It had red brick exterior walls with large glass windows, a building originally constructed by George Campbell's grandfather in the 1940s, and renovated by third-generation George 20 years ago. In her spacious office on the top floor of the three-story building, Melissa Campbell was gazing out the window. The autumn sunlight bathed the red and gold leaves of the street trees, casting the same golden light on her soft blonde hair. Melissa was the CEO manager of this leading New England construction materials company. Multiple contracts were stacked on her desk, and the latest inventory management system was displayed on her computer screen. From the adjacent room she could hear her sister Vanessa's voice. She seemed to be talking on the phone with a client bank. Yes, the second quarter performance exceeded expectations. Yes, thank you. It's all thanks to Melissa securing 3 major projects. Melissa smiled. Vanessa was acknowledging her achievements, at least on the surface. Vanessa always had perfect appearance. Today she was dressed in a navy blue pantsuit with a pearl necklace, looking as if she had stepped out of a fashion magazine. In contrast, Melissa preferred practical slacks and button-down shirts, clothing that allowed her to visit construction sites when necessary. I've reviewed the materials for tomorrow's meeting with Hudson Development. Vanessa entered Melissa's office holding a stack of documents. Her dark brown hair was cut to bounce at her shoulders, and her green eyes reflected sharp intelligence. Thanks, V, Melissa replied affectionately. Were there any issues? All the numbers are perfect. As usual, Vanessa said confidently, but their requested timeline might be a bit unrealistic. We have supply chain issues. I've already spoken with Jim Hudson. They're prepared for some delays. I confirmed it on the phone this morning. Of course you did, Vanessa said, sounding slightly surprised. I'm always impressed by your relationship-building skills. It sounded like praise, yet some other emotion seemed to seep through. Melissa sensed this subtle nuance, but didn't react. Her relationship with her sister was complicated. On the surface, they were cooperative sisters, but occasionally, competitiveness and tension lingered. Vanessa handled finance and human resources, while Melissa was responsible for technology and sales. They had maintained balance by respecting each other's domains. Have you reported to Dad? Vanessa asked. I talked to him when I stopped by the hospital yesterday. He was pleased, but Melissa trailed off. But what? As usual, he told me to increase the profit margin. Melissa shrugged. Don't worry, we both know his way isn't always right. George Campbell had been in and out of the hospital for heart problems since last year. Although he had stepped back from the company's daily operations, his presence remained strong, and his opinion was always sought for important decisions. He embodied the old-school construction industry values, profits first, emotions second. Melissa and Vanessa's mother, Eleanor, had similar views. Officially retired from the company, she still appeared at the office twice a week to observe the employees and offer advice when necessary, sometimes even when unnecessary. With strict traditional values, Eleanor blurred the lines between family and business, allowing family hierarchy and obligations to influence business decisions. Mom called, Vanessa said abruptly. There's a family meeting tomorrow night. She says it's important. Melissa paused momentarily. Do you know what it's about? She didn't say. But Vanessa hesitated slightly. I think it might be about the future of the company. Melissa tried to read her sister's expression, but Vanessa quickly looked away. There was a sense that she was hiding something. All right. I'll be there, Melissa replied. But first, I need to finish processing the new order from Schneider Industries. You're always all about work. Vanessa laughed lightly. But that's your strength too. After Vanessa left the room, Melissa stared at the family photograph on her desk. It was taken during the company's 75th anniversary celebration, showing George and Eleanor, Melissa and Vanessa standing at the company entrance. She could no longer tell what lay behind those smiles. She was often treated as the operations person and frequently excluded from strategic decisions. Even when she spoke at board meetings, she rarely felt her input was taken seriously. However, Melissa had a strength that no one else could match. She had connections throughout the industry and had built relationships with the most important customers. It was a talent that her father and mother had never tried to understand, the ability to build genuine relationships and trust. Did her family truly understand that these relationships were now supporting Campbell Construction Supply? Melissa picked up her smartphone and checked her schedule for tomorrow. Morning meeting with Hudson Development, 2 site visits in the afternoon, and the family meeting in the evening. She sensed that a big change was approaching, though she couldn't yet imagine what form it would take. After 10 at night, The Campbell Construction Supply headquarters building was almost completely silent. Only dim emergency lights illuminated the hallway leading to the third-floor conference room. Melissa looked up from the pile of documents on her desk and rotated her shoulders to relieve the stiffness in her neck. She had stayed late to review the final estimates in preparation for the meeting with Hudson Development. Finally done, she sighed with relief. From her office window, the nighttime Boston skyline stretched out before her. Tomorrow would be an even longer day. As she began to pack up, she heard faint voices coming from the conference room. Melissa stopped in her tracks. She was supposed to be the only one in the office. The janitor, Frank, worked on the first floor, and no one should be on this floor at this hour. She quietly approached the conference room. The door was slightly ajar, and voices leaked out. "I'm a bit worried about how to tell Melissa at tomorrow's meeting," her mother Eleanor's voice said. Melissa stopped in surprise. Who was her mother talking to? She bent slightly and peered through the gap in the door. A large laptop sat on the conference table with a Zoom meeting displayed on the screen. The screen showed her mother Eleanor, sister Vanessa, and father George, who appeared to be participating from a hospital bed. "Don't worry, Mom," Vanessa's confident voice rang out. "Melissa cares more about customer relationships than the company. She might be shocked when she sees the new organizational chart, but ultimately, she'll go along. She always has, hasn't she?" Melissa held her breath. A new organizational chart? She hadn't heard anything about this. Curiosity and anxiety swelled within her. Should she leave or continue listening? After a moment's conflict, she chose to stay put. As the eldest daughter, it's natural for her to serve the family. Her father George's voice was weaker than usual. Perhaps due to his illness, but the weight of his words remained unchanged. For the company's sake, leadership needs to be unified. Vanessa's financial perspective and strategic thinking are essential in today's market. "That's right, George," Eleanor agreed. "Melissa has wonderful technical knowledge and connections, but that's not enough. Under this new organizational structure, she'll be placed where she can excel most." Pain shot through Melissa's chest. She pressed herself against the window frame and listened intently. "I'll be the president, and my sister can just be a regular employee." Vanessa's voice was mixed with excitement. "We've been meeting our quarterly targets because of my financial management. Melissa's sales ability is certainly important, but it's perfect as her role." But as chief executive, Vanessa cut herself off. But her intention was clear. Melissa was about to be demoted. Her hands began to shake. "How do you think your sister will react?" her father asked. "She'll understand." Her mother's voice was calm. "We'll use Melissa as needed, then discard her when we're done. All along, her talents have been used for the company's benefit. This is no different." Melissa stifled a gasp. The words "use her as needed, then discard her" stabbed into her heart like a sharp knife. Was this her mother's true feelings? How did she see her as a family member, as a daughter? "We need to maintain her customer relationships," Vanessa continued. "But concentrate decision-making authority with me. Even after Dad recovers, I'll remain CEO." "That's right," George said after coughing. "This company is what I inherited from my father. To pass it on to the next generation, the most capable person should be in charge. Vanessa, you will fulfill that role." Hot tears ran down Melissa's cheeks. For 15 years, she had worked for this company. She joined right after college graduation, starting from the most demanding job sites to build her current position. She had worked late nights, sacrificed weekends, and put her personal life second. All of it was to make the family business successful, and to be recognized by her father and mother. "At tomorrow's meeting, we'll formally announce the new positions and titles," Eleanor said. "We plan to give Melissa the title of Director of Technology and Customer Relations. It sounds impressive, but with limited authority, and no right to participate in board meetings." "It's getting late," Vanessa said. "Let's end the meeting here. Tomorrow is an important day." "Indeed," her father agreed. "Good night, both of you." Even after the screen went dark, Melissa stood frozen in place, the sensation of her world crumbling around her. Betrayal from the family she had trusted, the reality that she had been seen as just a tool. She entered the conference room and stared at the laptop that was still connected. After gently closing it, she walked to the window. The lights of nighttime Boston reflected in her tears. For hours, Melissa returned to her office and continued thinking in the darkness. The sense of alienation she had felt within her family since childhood, the constant feeling of not being enough, the desperation of never being fully recognized no matter how hard she tried, all of it now appeared before her in a clear form. Before dawn, she solidified her resolve. Never again would she be used, never again would she be someone's tool. Melissa Campbell stood up and took a small notebook from her desk drawer. Inside was a contact list known only to her, a treasure trove of industry key persons and relationships she had built up over many years. "They don't know my value," Melissa whispered quietly, "but they'll soon learn." She picked up her cell phone and dialed a number. Outside it was still dark, the clock showing 5 a.m. "Hello, Robert, it's Melissa. I'm sorry for calling so early, but I need your help. Can we meet today? I have something very important to discuss." The restaurant on the top floor of a high-rise in Boston's financial district was already bustling despite being just after 7 in the morning. Through the large glass windows, there was a panoramic view of the Charles River and the city. There, Melissa was waiting for Robert Stein, one of the most influential investors in the industry. Robert was a heavyweight in real estate and construction, with salt and pepper hair and sharp blue eyes. His relationship with Melissa began 10 years ago, when she was still a newcomer in sales. Impressed by her integrity and knowledge during their first deal, Robert had continued watching over her career. Melissa. She turned to see Robert smiling cordially. He was dressed in a sophisticated gray suit, walking briskly with a cane in hand. "I'm sorry for calling you out so early," Melissa said, standing up and embracing him lightly. "I'll always take your call," Robert said as he sat down. "It seems there's a serious issue. Business talk usually doesn't start until after 9. Melissa hesitated for a moment, but the anger and determination she had felt since last night pushed her forward. "I need to talk to you about my family," she said quietly, "and about the future of our company." She told him everything she had heard last night. The family's betrayal, their plan to use her as a mere pawn, and the conspiracy to strip her of management rights. As she spoke, Melissa's voice occasionally trembled with emotion, but her eyes held firm resolve. Robert listened silently. His expression grew more severe as she continued. "It's foolish of them to underestimate you," he said after taking a sip of coffee. "I've known George for 40 years, but sometimes I question his judgment. Especially when he misjudges his greatest asset." "Asset?" "Yes, you, Melissa." Robert looked at her with serious eyes. "Everyone in the industry knows. Behind Campbell's success are your relationship-building skills and technical knowledge. Without you, that company is worth only half its value." Melissa felt a warmth in her chest at Robert's words. It was recognition she had never received from her family all these years. "But what should I do?" she asked. "There's a family meeting today. They plan to announce their plan to demote me. Are you going to accept it?" Robert's gaze sharpened. "No," Melissa answered firmly. "I will never be someone's tool again." "But how to fight back?" "Shares." Robert tapped his finger on the table. "What's the stock structure of Campbell?" "It's a family business. Dad holds 45%, Mom has 20%, Vanessa and I each have 15%. The remaining 5% is held by longtime employees." "I see." Robert contemplated. "Your family controls the majority of shares." But if an outside investor were to, he cut off his words, narrowing his eyes as if calculating something. "Robert, what are you thinking?" "Acquiring Campbell's shares," he said quietly but forcefully. "I have the funds. And industry connections. If we could buy the shares held by your father and mother. But Dad won't sell." Melissa shook her head. "He considers the company a family legacy. A man weakened by illness sometimes makes unexpected decisions." A gleam flashed in Robert's eyes. "Especially if threatened with a sharp decline in his company's value." Melissa frowned. "A decline in value? What do you mean? What's Campbell's greatest asset?" Robert asked. "The building? Inventory?" "No, customer relationships." "And who built many of those relationships?" "I did." Melissa began to understand. "Yes. What if your customers started saying they would reconsider their business if you were removed from the company? What would happen to Campbell's value?" A plan was beginning to take shape. Melissa mentally organized her network customers she had built personal relationships with, people who trusted her expertise and integrity. "I could invest all my savings to increase my own shares," she solidified her resolve. "Even if we can't persuade my father and mother, other shareholders." "Exactly," Robert nodded. "First, let's contact your customers. Explain the situation and have them express their support for you. At the same time, I'll proceed with acquiring shares. We don't have much time." Throughout the morning they developed their strategy. Melissa pulled out her customer list and selected the most trusted business partners. Robert called his financial advisors and lawyers to begin preparations for share acquisition. One more piece of advice. Before they moved on to lunch, Robert looked at Melissa with a serious expression. "At today's family meeting, it's better to pretend you don't know anything. Act like you agree with their plan to buy time." "Acting?" Melissa hesitated slightly. "I'm not good at lying." "This isn't a lie," Robert said quietly. "This is strategy. You're fighting to protect your value. There's no need to alert the enemy to your plans." Melissa took a deep breath. "I understand. I'll try." After the meeting, Melissa returned to the company. With a new sense of purpose and determination, she called 5 key customers during the afternoon. Choosing her words carefully, she mentioned the possibility of organizational changes at the company, and emphasized the importance of their relationship. Surprisingly, all the customers immediately expressed their support for her. "Melissa, without you, we wouldn't do business with Campbell," the CEO of Toronto Development declared. Other customers had similar reactions. Meanwhile, Robert was moving at an incredible pace. He approached the longtime employees who held the 5% of shares, and offered to buy them at twice the market value. Within 3 days, those shares became his. "This secures 20% of the shares," Robert reported to Melissa by phone late that evening. "Combined with your 15%, that's 35%. We need another 16% for a majority. I can buy another 7% with my savings," Melissa replied. "That leaves 9%. I'll handle the rest, Robert said confidently. I'll approach your mother. Eleanor has always been a practical woman, if she sells part of her shares. My mother? Melissa was skeptical. She's the type to consider things that benefit her, especially if she thinks Campbell's future is in jeopardy. That night, Melissa barely slept. Her heart was filled with complex emotions toward her family and anxiety about what was to come. However, every time she recalled the words she had heard the night before, her determination strengthened. I am not a tool, she said to her reflection in the mirror. I will create a new future with people who understand my value. 2 weeks later, Melissa and Robert's plan began to bear fruit. Surprisingly, Eleanor agreed to sell part of her shares to Robert. Rumor had it that she had begun to doubt the company's future. Feeling the pressure from key customers and market instability, she wanted to secure part of her assets. Through Robert's negotiation skills and strong support declarations from Melissa's customers, they finally acquired 51% of the company's shares. The fate of Campbell Construction Supply was now in their hands. There's no need to wait for the next board meeting, Robert said. Now is the time to act. Melissa nodded. There was no fear in her eyes, only strength and determination that she had sealed away for a long time. I'm ready, she replied. Melissa, can you come to the conference room? Vanessa's voice was a bit higher than usual, with tension seeping through. Melissa, reviewing documents in her office, allowed a faint smile. She had been waiting 2 weeks for this day. I'll be right there. She slowly stood up and organized the papers on her desk. Outside the window, bright spring sunshine illuminated the streets of Boston. Melissa checked her reflection in the window glass. Navy blue pantsuit with a pearl necklace. An outfit specially chosen for today, not to imitate Vanessa's style. This was battle dress. Entering the conference room, she was greeted by the expected faces. Vanessa, her father George in a wheelchair, and her mother Eleanor. Their expressions revealed that today was special. Her father's face showed strictness mixed with the tension of having to convey something difficult. Her mother appeared calm, but her fingers tapping lightly on the table betrayed her anxiety. And Vanessa had a subtly confident expression, as if assured of victory. Sit down, Melissa, her father commanded. Melissa silently complied, sitting across from the three of them. We have important matters to discuss today, her father continued after clearing his throat. About the future of Campbell Construction Supply. After careful consideration, we've decided to reorganize the company. Her mother took over. We've determined that leadership unification is necessary to respond to the changing times. Melissa said nothing, looking at each of their faces in turn. Following Robert's advice, she was giving a perfect performance, pretending to be surprised, wearing a slightly confused expression. To put it simply, Vanessa leaned forward and said, I'm becoming the CEO. Of course, you'll still have an important role, Mel. As Director of Technology and Customer Relations, a position where you can maximize your strengths. So I'm being demoted? Melissa asked quietly. You might see it that way, her father said sternly. But this is for the benefit of the entire company. Vanessa has a strategic perspective and financial expertise. In today's business environment, such abilities are essential. Melissa contained her emotions and calmly continued her questioning. What about the board of directors? Will I still be a member? The three exchanged glances for a moment. I'm sorry, her mother said. The board will be downsized. Just George, Vanessa, and myself. Vanessa added. And your salary structure will change a bit too. Your base salary will remain the same, but the bonus structure will be modified. Melissa took a deep breath. A flame of anger flashed in her eyes for an instant, but she quickly subdued it. It wasn't time yet. I understand, she replied quietly. When will this take effect? The three showed obvious signs of relief. They had expected resistance. Starting Monday next week, her father said, relaxing his tension slightly. The official announcement to all employees will be made on Friday. Melissa nodded. Is there anything else I should know? No, Vanessa smiled. Thank you for your cooperation, Mel. See, we're still the best team, aren't we? Melissa returned a thin smile. Yes, the best team. After the meeting, Melissa returned to her office. Her heart was filled with quiet anger and determination, but outwardly nothing had changed. She picked up her phone and sent a brief message. Proceed as planned. 3 days later, Friday morning arrived. All employees of Campbell Construction Supply were gathered in the large conference room. About 50 employees were seated, with George, Eleanor, and Vanessa lined up on the stage at the front. Melissa sat in the front row, quietly waiting for her moment. Good morning, everyone, George raised his voice from his wheelchair. Today we have an important announcement. This is a day we take a new step toward the future of our company. After coughing, he continued. For many years I have led this company, but times have changed and new leadership is needed. As of today, my second daughter, Vanessa Campbell, will become the new CEO. Modest applause arose from the audience. Some employees wore surprised expressions. Many were looking at Melissa. Furthermore, we will restructure the management team. Eleanor stepped forward and said, this change is to enable more efficient and strategic decision-making. Just as Vanessa was about to stand up with a broad smile, the doors at the back of the conference room opened, and Robert Stein entered accompanied by several men and women in suits. Excuse the interruption, Robert's powerful voice echoed through the room. May I say a word before your announcement? The room fell silent. The color drained from George's face. Robert, what do you want? I have a report regarding the new shareholder structure. Robert said as he walked to the front. It directly relates to your announcement today. He took out documents from his briefcase. 51% of Campbell Construction Supplies shares have been transferred to a new shareholder group. This change has been legally registered and is effective immediately. Murmurs arose from the audience. George half rose from his wheelchair. What? That's impossible. All transactions were legal, George, Robert said calmly. 10% of Eleanor's 20%, 5% from longtime employees, Melissa's 15%, plus newly acquired 21%. That's 51 total. All eyes turned to Melissa. She slowly stood up and walked to the front. Good morning, everyone. Her voice was unwavering and strong. I also have an announcement. She stood next to Robert and surveyed the room. As you know, I've worked at this company for 15 years. I've built customer relationships, deepened technical knowledge, and taken pride in the Campbell name. She briefly looked at her parents and Vanessa. Fear and confusion were evident on their faces, but recently I discovered that my family refers to me as someone to use as needed, then discard when done. Apparently my role is sufficient as just a regular employee. Their words, not mine. The room grew more tumultuous. Eleanor's face turned pale, and Vanessa's lips trembled. Having acquired 51% of this company's shares, I have the right to change the management team, Melissa continued. As of today, Rachel Morrison will become the new CEO. She gestured, and one of the women who had accompanied Robert stepped forward. In her mid-50s, Rachel was a respected veteran with 25 years of experience in the construction industry. And Dad, Mom, Vanessa. Melissa looked directly at the three of them. You're all fired. The room fell into complete silence. Melissa, you can't be serious? Her father said in a trembling voice. We're family. You can't choose your family, Melissa replied calmly, but you can choose who you work with. I choose to work with people who understand my value. She turned back to the employees. Many of you will remain. Rachel and I will create a new organization that properly values talent and contribution. If you have questions, we'll address them individually. Almost as soon as those words ended, Vanessa broke down in tears, and George clutched his chest with a pained expression. Eleanor sat down, looking dazed. Melissa looked at them and delivered her final words. You have 3 hours to pack your office belongings. Security will accompany you. Then she left the room with Rachel and Robert. In the hallway, Robert gently gripped her shoulder. Well done, Melissa. Melissa exhaled deeply. It's not over. This is a new beginning. In her eyes was determination, along with complex emotions. This was a victory, but a painful one. The bonds with her family would be forever changed. But she knew that sometimes difficult choices are necessary to protect one's value. A year later, Boston was experiencing an unusually warm autumn. From the window of Campbell Construction Supplies' new headquarters, Melissa gazed at the Charles River, golden in the sunlight. Beside her, CEO Rachel Morrison was reviewing the latest performance report, up 25% year over year. Remarkable results, Rachel smiled. Your customer base expansion strategy has succeeded. Melissa nodded with a sense of quiet satisfaction. It's the team's achievement. We've created an environment where everyone can use their talents. Since that dramatic day, Campbell had changed significantly. Under Rachel's leadership, the company had grown rapidly, and its industry reputation had risen. As Chief Strategy Officer, Melissa had finally found a place to display her true worth. Employees welcomed the new management team, and morale was at an all-time high due to transparent decision-making processes and fair evaluation systems. I heard from Robert, Rachel said, taking a sip of coffee. He's delighted that his investment has doubled. Melissa smiled. He believed in me. I'm glad I could live up to his trust. As she was leaving the office, Melissa briefly checked her cell phone. It was 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. There were no messages from her family. George and Eleanor had moved to a small condominium in Florida. Unable to maintain their once lavish lifestyle, they were forced into retirement. Occasionally emails came from Eleanor, initially filled with accusations and anger. Their tone had gradually softened recently. Vanessa faced more difficult circumstances. Having lost her position at Campbell, she struggled to find employment with competitors, and eventually ended up working as a regular employee at a small building materials company. Several apologetic messages from her had arrived, but Melissa wasn't yet ready to reply. Back in her apartment, Melissa sat on the sofa, in front of the fireplace, and opened a photo album. Family photos from childhood, smiling parents and sisters. Had they really been happy then, or had she simply refused to see what wasn't visible? The phone rang, surprising Melissa. It was her mother. Melissa, what are your plans for Thanksgiving? Eleanor's voice was different from her once confident tone. Your father and I, and Vanessa too, we thought we might all get together. Melissa chose her words carefully as she replied. I'm not sure yet. Let me think about it. I understand, Eleanor said quietly. Just we want to see you. We were wrong. We misjudged your value. We want to apologize for that in person. After hanging up, Melissa stared out the window for a long time. She might be able to forgive. Not forget, but forgive. The next day, she told Rachel she would be taking time off for Thanksgiving. Spending it with family? Rachel gently asked. Yes, Melissa answered after a moment's thought. It might be the start of a new relationship. Maybe that's what family is, not perfect, but family nonetheless. As twilight fell, Melissa turned off the lights in her office and thought, life is unpredictable. A year ago she was wounded by betrayal. Now she knows her worth and walks a path she has chosen. And perhaps, though it's not yet certain, she's taking a small step toward reconciliation with her family. You can't choose your family, she whispered quietly, but you can choose how to build relationships.